What's up, fighting fans? Tips from the Fight IQ channel. Today we're coming back for another episode of the Fight IQ show. It's time to prepare for the weekend. I'm gonna help you to choose which fight to watch in priority. And this week there are so many fights, it's not gonna be easy. I'm gonna pick my top 3, then mention also some other fights that might be worth your attention. So let's get ready to rumble! So many events this weekend and good ones too. On the menu there is the Cage Warriors 166 in Santiago on Friday 23rd, the LFA 177 in Niagara Falls on Friday 23rd, the Santiago vs Nakatani boxing card in Tokyo on Saturday 24th, the KSW Epic in Gliwice, Poland on Saturday 24th, the PFL vs Bellator Champs event in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia on Saturday 24th, and finally the UFC Fight Night in Mexico on Saturday 24th. Number 3, I have Clay Collard vs McKee. It will be in the main card on the PFL vs Bellator event in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia on Saturday 24th. It might surprise some people that I have it in my top 3, but I think it has potential to be a fight of the night. It's a real banger. It will be a lightweight bout and Clay Collard will be representing PFL. I talked about him a few times on this channel already. He's pro since 2011, 24 and 11, 14 finishes. He joined the PFL in 2021 after a parenthesis in pro boxing in which he was since 2019. He got 15 fights, by the way. His 6th entry in the organization. He had some memorable battles versus Anthony Pettis, Stevie Ray and Shane Burgos, in which he displayed his great boxing skills, his head movement and his toughness. He lost the 2023 PFL finals versus Olivier Aubin-Mercier last November, but he is back, hungry and motivated for the next season. But first he will have to defend PFL's honor versus Bellator's finest, McKee. McKee did all his career at Bellator, 21 and 1, 13 finishes. He did most of his fight at 145, steamrolling on all of his opponents. And his performances got him a title shot versus Patricio Pitbull, the MMA legend and champion at the time, in July from 2021. He beat the champ with a guillotine choke in the first round, becoming the new featherweight king. He had a rematch versus Pitbull in April from 2022, but he lost his crown after a 5 rounds battle in which Pitbull got the win by unanimous decision. Since then, McKee transitioned to lightweight, 3 fights, 3 wins versus Spike Carlisle, Roberto de Souza and Sidney Outlaw last November. I see this one going to the decision, to be honest. Collard has the power advantage, he's tough as a nail, so I don't see him getting finished. But still, I give the edge to McKee. I think he's faster, he's a more complete fighter and he's able to bring the fight to the ground if needed. If he respects Collard's power, uses his long reach, mix things up with a little bit of wrestling, I think he will get his end raised. Number 2, Impa Kasanganay vs Johnny Eblen, co-main event of the PFL vs Bellator event in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia on Saturday 24th. I'm pretty hyped up about that one. It will be at middleweight, which is an interesting factor to take into account. Indeed, Impa Kasanganay is the 2023 PFL season winner, but in the light heavyweight weight class. He was a middleweight before joining PFL though, 13 fights, 10 wins, 4 finishes. He was a UFC fighter after getting a contract in the Dana White Contender Series in August from 2020. He made his official UFC debut 2 weeks after that by defeating Maki Pitolo via unanimous decision. But after that, things didn't go so well for him. He got finished twice. First the highlight reel finish for Joaquin Buckley and the TKO loss versus Carlston Harris. He got also a submission win versus Palatnikov, but it was not enough to get an extension of contract from the UFC, and he got released in September from 2021. Since 2023, he joined the PFL as a light heavyweight. He dominated all of his opponents in the 2023 season, unanimous decision over Corey Hendricks, submission win over Tim Karen, he KO'd Martin Hamlet, and bullied Josh Silveira for 5 rounds in the finals. Before defending his title in the next season, he will have another great challenge, move down to middleweight and face one of the best fighters in this weight class, Johnny Eblen. Eblen is the Bellator middleweight king, 14-0, 7 finishes. He entered Bellator in 2019 and started piling up wins thanks to his great conditioning, his power and his wrestling skills. After getting 7 wins in a row in 3 years' time, he got a shot at the title in June from 2022. He completely dominated Gegard Mousasi for 5 rounds and snatched his belt in the process. He did 2 title defenses in 2023. He won via unanimous decision versus Anatoly Tokov, and he TKO'd Fabian Edwards in Dublin last September. Eblen is clearly my favorite. His conditioning is unmatched in middleweight, and I fear that Kasanganay will suffer from the weight cut. Also, Eblen is clearly the better wrestler, and I expect him to take the fight to the ground as soon as possible. Even though Kasanganay is powerful and got some submissions wins, I don't think he will be able to resist to Eblen. So I would say Eblen by TKO in the 3rd round. And number 1, Yair Rodriguez versus Brian Ortega, co-main event of the UFC Fight Night in Mexico on Saturday 24th. My favorite fight of the weekend, I think it should have been the main event of the UFC Fight Night. 2 former title contenders in featherweight and a long-awaited rematch. First one ended early after Ortega got injured in the 1st round. Rodriguez entered the UFC in 2014 after winning the Ultimate Fighter Latin America. He's 10-3, 1 no contest there, 5 finishes. He started his UFC career with great performances, including unanimous decision win over Dan Hooker, a KO over Andre Fili, split decision versus Alex Caceres, and a TKO over former champ and Hall of Famer BJ Penn. His 6-fight win streak was stopped by Frankie Edgar in May from 2017. He completely destroyed him with his wrestling and ground and pound. But Rodriguez bounced back, incredible performance versus Korean Zombie in November of 2018, knocking him out at the last second of the 5th round with a beautiful elbow. He beat Jeremy Stevens by unanimous decision in October from 2019 and then headed to face Max Holloway for the number 1 contender spot. He lost via decision, but what a great fight it was. He didn't give up on his dream to be a UFC champ. After the fight versus Ortega, he submitted Josh Emmett in February from 2023 and got the interim title and a chance to unify the belts. He then lost via TKO versus Alexander Volkanovski in the 3rd round. He will now face Ortega to settle the score. Ortega is at the UFC since July from 2014, 7-3 there, 1 no contest, 6 finishes. He won his debut by submission, but it was then overturned into a no contest because of steroid use. He came back 11 months later and started a 6-fight win streak, all finishes including a KO over Clay Guida, a submission over Moicano and Dan Swenson, and a KO over Frankie Edgar. He then faced Max Holloway for the featherweight title. The doctor stopped the contest after the 4th round. Ortega was taking too much damages. He didn't fight for almost 2 years after that, but he came back with a beautiful win over the Korean Zombie by a unanimous decision. He had another shot at the title, but versus Volk this time. He lost by a unanimous decision, but he showcased his toughness. He took a lot of damage but never gave up, and he even came close to submit the champ. He didn't fight since facing Yair Rodriguez in July from 2022, so again a long absence from Ortega. I expect a bit of cage rust from him, but I think it's gonna be a great fight. Both are entertaining fighters, able to finish the fight on the ground or with their striking. I'd give an edge to Yair Rodriguez. I think he's faster and more technical, but careful because Ortega never gives up and he always found a way to stay in the fight. So I would say Yair Rodriguez via decision, guys. Obviously, there are other fights that hold a lot of promises, but I had to make a choice. Still, be sure to keep an eye on Renan Ferreira versus Ryan Bader. It will be at the PFL versus Bellator event. It's the main event. Aside from being 2 heavyweight champs, it's also 2 different generations, and I'm really curious to see if Ferreira can step up to be at Bader's level. On the same event, there will be Patricio Pitbull versus Gabriel Braga at featherweight. Also Ray Cooper versus Jason Jackson in a catchweight bout. Thiago Santos versus Yoel Romero, clash of the titans in this one. And I'd like to keep an eye on Clarissa Shields. She's going back to MMA on the undercard. Might be interesting to see her progress there. Some other nice fights at the UFC Fight Night in Mexico. The main event, of course, Moreno versus Royval. I didn't put it in my top 3. I have the feeling that we see too much the same fights at flyweight, but still high level fight. I think that Moreno will pull this one out with the support of the home crowd. Rosas Jr. versus Tercios is also a pretty interesting matchup. Two explosive bantamweights, the volume of Tercios versus the grappling of Rosas. Also, Puelles versus Siam, a good striker contest. And I'm also happy to see Felipe dos Santos coming back to the UFC after his great fight last time versus Manel Cap, and he will now face Victor Altamirano. I'm really interested by the Cage Warriors co-main event, Mason Jones versus Bryce Logan, both coming out of big wins. I'll give an edge to Jones. I think he's willing to go back to the UFC and he looked great in his last 2 bouts. I also keep an eye on some matchups from the LFA 177, the main event, the interim welterweight championship between Devin Smith and Shamit Khan Magomedov. I would go with Magomedov, by the way. He seems more complete. He won mostly by finishes in his career and he got back-to-back wins at LFA. Nice co-main event too, women's flyweight belt, 2 undefeated prospects, Shannon Clark versus Tayani Lopez. Also, Akhtamov versus Bianchini might be fun to watch. Great boxing night in Tokyo, 3 titles on the line. Alejandro Santiago will defend his WBC World Bantamweight title versus Junto Nakatani, former super flyweight champ. I almost put that one in my top 3, so don't sleep on it. Takuma Inoue will defend his WBA World Bantamweight title versus Jerwin Ancajas. And finally, Kosei Tanaka will face Christian Bakasegua for the vacant WBO World Super Flyweight title. I also keep an eye on the KSW Epic if I have the time. It might be a fun event. It looks a bit like a one championship event, grappling, boxing, different rules. That might be fun to watch. And that's a wrap, guys. Now you know what to watch this weekend. As usual, punch those like and subscribe button, it helps me a lot. Go hit the comments, Discord, Telegram and Instagram with your thoughts on the coming matchups. Enjoy the fights, I'll see you next week.
Let me, man's gal wanna come undress me. Swing with a right, but I might go lefty. I made plus with it, so don't test me. They wouldn't let me. Man's gal wanna come undress me. Swing with a right, but I might go lefty. I made plus with it, so don't test me. Nah, you don't even